We need to find a way forward to make sure that we can stop terrorists while protecting privacy and liberty of innocent Americans. I will provide our intelligence and law enforcement agencies with the tools they need to track and take out the terrorists without undermining our Constitution and our freedom. As for our common defense, we reject as false the choice between our safety and our ideals.
We reject as false the choice between our safety and our ideals. That was at his inauguration in January of 2009. The National Security Agency is collecting data from calls of every American signed up for phone service with any of the three major networks, Verizon, AT&T, and Sprint, nearly the entire country. The feds also have direct access to servers operated by the world's biggest tech companies, including Facebook, Google, that would include Gmail, Yahoo, Skype, and more, though the companies deny it. They can see emails, web searches, even credit card transactions being performed by various millions of people suspected of no wrongdoing. A short time ago, the president said these invasions of privacy are worth it to protect Americans from terrorism.
The modest encroachments on privacy that are involved in getting phone numbers or duration without a name attached and not looking at content, that on net, it was worth us doing.
I thought it was curious. I'm not too sure what questions he was answering, because they were not the questions being posed by the civil liberties community. First of all, the notion that these programs are modest is rather laughable. I mean, what the government is creating are massive data banks that will effectively make transparent the communications and activities of citizens who are not charged with any crime. I mean, if you look at those telephone companies, they were demanding every single phone call made by every single citizen. It's the type of surveillance that once was thought futuristic, that wasn't even technically possible, but it is now. And the question that is being raised here is, how will this type of fishbowl society change not just our relationship to our government, but who we are? If you feel that all of your communications are being fed into a massive data bank that the government has access to, it's a major violation of privacy. And I'm really astonished by the dismissive attitude of the president.
Can we trust this administration? This, as the director of national intelligence admits to a domestic spying program he denied existed under oath as recently as March.
Does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly. There are cases where they could inadvertently, perhaps, collect, but not wittingly.
Mr. Clapper's reversal comes on the heels of our Attorney General, Eric Holder, being accused of possible perjury for telling Congress this last month, while knowing he had already labeled our own James Rosen a criminal.
With regard to the potential prosecution of the press for the disclosure of material, that is not something that I've ever been involved in, heard of, or would think would be a wise policy.
And that's not all. We now know that the former IRS commissioner gave testimony that was not true in 2012 about the IRS targeting conservative groups.
What's been happening has been the normal back and forth that happens with the IRS. There's absolutely no targeting. This is the kind of back and forth that happens when people apply for 501c4 status.
And then there was the White House press secretary, Jay Carney, explaining the very small, insignificant role the White House and State Department supposedly had when it came to changing the talking points about the Benghazi terror attack.
What the White House and State Department have made clear that the single adjustment that was made to those talking points by either of these two institutions were changing the word consulate to diplomatic facility.
And we now know that was totally false. The White House and the State Department had significant input and were responsible for many of the changes that were made to those talking points. So can we trust them? Joining me now, Leslie Marshall, a nationally syndicated talk show host, Mike Gallagher, host of The Mike Gallagher Show, and Judy Miller, who's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and author, all our Fox News contributors. Let me start with you on that, Judy. I mean,
well, perhaps English isn't their first language, but if you listen to the questions and you listen to the answers, you have to say, what were these officials thinking? If they were not intentionally misleading, they inadvertently misled, and I think that the fact that Eric Holder refuses to provide an explanation for the discrepancy in what he now says he meant and what he said tells us that they don't even feel they owe the American people an explanation. It's truly shocking and reprehensible.
I mean, they're all pretty blatant. And the one with Clapper, I mean, you can see him how he's doing this, you know, Mike, and it's almost like that's my signal for don't ask me about that because I can't talk about that. But you know, if you can't, we saw Eric Holder do it just this week. If they ask you something you can't talk about, then you say it's not appropriate for me to address that in this open session. We can talk about that. But you don't lie. These are not underlings in the administration, Judy. These are, I mean, the Attorney General, the Director of National Intelligence, the White House Press Secretary, the Commissioner of the IRS. So where's the accountability for these, at best, misleading statements?
That's the problem, Megyn. There isn't any. And this is highlighted by the fact that the president, who professed to be troubled by the accusation that James Rosen was perhaps violating the Espionage Act by soliciting information as a reporter, which is basically what we all do, the fact that he appointed Eric Holder to look into Eric Holder's behavior tells you how serious this investigation is.
I say this as somebody who practiced law for 9 years. When you take it to, when you're under oath, there is a special obligation. I mean, I get, you know, people say things to cover their backsides. You're under oath and you don't tell the truth. That is a totally different story. And today, Leslie, the DNI Clapper put out a statement in response to the Guardian's report, which broke the story about the phone records, okay? And he's not happy with the leak, which you understand. But he says, in part, I believe it's important to address the misleading impression left by the article. What about the misleading impression left by you in your congressional testimony, sir?
When I looked up what conservative attorneys were even saying with regard to Eric Holder, they're saying misleading, yes. Is he backing off of how much responsibility he had with regard to James Rosen, who I think is an excellent reporter and unbiased, by the way, in my opinion, but yes. But is there a perjury offense here? And they're saying, no, contradiction between what he said and what he did isn't strong enough for perjury. Now, with regard to the head, of the NSA, again, is that going to be considered perjury because he chose not to say that's classified information, and he obviously
didn't take any off ramp. Let's just can we have Clapper teed up? Can we hear Clapper just one more time?
Does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly.
Now, how do we have the director come out and talk about the misleading report in The Guardian and not his own statements, Mike?
I'm thinking lying under oath is perjury. I'm thinking that if you swear to tell the truth and you blatantly lie, that's going to be a problem. My assessment and my team's assessment was that they help us prevent terrorist attacks.
This is a dragnet. It's an overreach, and we've got to find out why this is justified simply because the NSA wants to do some data mining.
Let's bring in Chris Wallace. I've gotten to where I wrote little notes to Eric Holder at the bottom down there all the time on emails that I send out. But now I guess I ought to just pick up the phone every now and then and say, yo, what up?
Well, in fairness, there are two programs here we're talking about. One is the phone records program, and in that particular case, what's happening is that all the information from Verizon, and one assumes also from Sprint and AT&T and the other phone companies, all the phone records are going to the National Security Agency. Now, that is not the content of a phone call, but if I call you, they will know that one phone call number called another phone call number, and the call lasted for a certain period of time. On the other hand, the government does does have to go back to a court. If they decide they want to investigate what I'm saying to you, they have to go back to a judge again to get permission to look into that. As far as the internet, the emails are concerned, that we are assured today by both General Clapper, the head of the DNI, and also by the president, that this is only of foreign citizens and only on foreign soil. No U.S. citizens and no one, foreign or domestic, on U.S. soil.
And the funny thing is, we're just supposed to hear it and believe it and move on with our day. That's it. Have a nice one. Good. There's nothing to see here. Keep moving. Keep moving.
Actually, I was reading it today, and I can't remember. It was a 1979 court case. I remember now. Actually, I do. Which basically said, if I make a call to you and that record is held by a third party, namely the phone company, that we have no presumption of privacy, and that is government's business. So the Supreme Court has said that that kind of data mining is constitutional.
Well, that's good. I knew privacy was dead. Now it's confirmed.
Well,
Fox News can now
Supreme Court
confirm
agrees with
there's
us.
no more privacy. It's over. President Obama assured the nation nobody is listening to your telephone calls. Thank you, Mr. President. It was his first public response since 2 newspapers revealed a slew of details about our government's ongoing surveillance programs. First, the British newspaper The Guardian reported that a court order, has allowed the feds to pull phone records for tens of millions of customers of Verizon. The report states those records include phone numbers and times of the calls, but not the actual content. That's what they tell us. No wiretapping, in other words. And then there's the report from the Washington Post, a whole separate thing. That report indicates the federal investigators are mining our online data, pulling our emails, our photographs, our search histories, and much more. The president says those programs have kept America safe in exchange for, as he puts it, quote, modest encroachments on privacy. Civil liberties groups say the tracking goes way too far. Joining us now is the former Deputy Director of the National Security Agency, Colonel Cedric Leighton. Sir, good to see you. Thank you.
My pleasure, Chev. It's good to be with you.
Why is this not a direct violation of the Constitution?
Well, because all 3 branches of the government are involved in this. You've got the executive who proposes this, and then you have the legislative that basically approved it, and then, of course, the courts have given final legal approval for it. So the way the structure works right now, you have the 3 basic branches of government saying it's okay to do this.
Everything I'm doing online, the duration of my phone calls and the number to which I'm making a call, where I was when I made that call, my emails, my photographs. Would you understand it if an American citizen said to you, this doesn't sound like America? I'm confident that the framers said in the 4th Amendment and beyond, you can't do this. And that the court says you can, and you say you can, and the president says you can, doesn't much matter. And some people out there are furious.
Absolutely. Well, and this is, having seen what a communist society looks like up close and personal, I know exactly what a situation is like when you don't have the civil liberties that we've come to take for granted in this country. So
you'd forgive us if we didn't even believe you, right? Because representatives of the government have testified before Congress that they certainly don't data mine people from all across the country. And of course, we know that's a bold-faced lie.
Well, and here's what happens. They shouldn't have made the statements that they made. They shouldn't have couched them in the way that they did.
Shouldn't have lied to us, like they do all the time about matters of secrecy and privacy.
Right. You never lie. First of all, you never lie.
Yeah, but they did. And they continue to lie to us. And what they're doing is chipping it away at our liberty. And it seems to me that the Constitution has regulations about how much liberty you can take away while trying to secure our make us secure. There's a line there. And can't you look at this objectively and say, man, we're over the line?
Well, I think it would be much better if the system were directed at very specific people that you knew were
actually that would not just be much better. That would be constitutional.
Megan, we're down the rabbit hole in Alice in Wonderland on this stuff. I mean, let's face it, one of the poster children for deception, Susan Rice, has just been recommended by the president to be his national security advisor.
And if people can't trust not only the executive branch, but also don't trust Congress and don't trust federal judges to make sure that we're abiding by the Constitution, due process, and rule of law, then we're going to have some problems here.
Amen.